October 1958, Tucson, Arizona. A small adobe house on the west side of South Meyer Avenue, 4 blocks from the Santa Cruz River, in a neighborhood where the mesquite trees grow through the cracks in the sidewalk, and the October mornings still carry the last of the summer heat. At 9 in the morning, the Pima County Sheriff's deputy pulls up in a county truck with a padlock on the seat beside him. An eviction order from the county court is in his hand. The woman who lives in the house is 71 years old. She has lived there for 29 years. She is standing on the porch when the deputy arrives, and she does not move from the porch when he comes up the walk. At the end of the block, a dusty station wagon that has been heading north on South Meyer slows down. Then it stops. Then it turns around. Nobody recognizes it yet. Here is the story. Edna Marsh came to Tucson in 1929 with her husband Frank and their 2 children, a daughter named Ruth and a son named Douglas, in a truck loaded with everything they owned. Frank Marsh was from Oklahoma. He had worked the oil fields and saved enough to buy a small property in Tucson, where he planned to start a repair business, mechanical work, the kind of work he had always been good at. He bought the house on South Meyer Avenue for $1,400 and paid cash for it. He built the workshop in the back himself from adobe block and timber. He painted the sign above the workshop door in red letters, Marsh and Son, General Repair. Douglas was 7 years old. The son part of the sign was a promise about the future. Frank Marsh ran the workshop for 12 years. He fixed engines and appliances and anything else people brought to him. He was precise and honest, and he charged fair prices, and the neighborhood knew it. In 1941, Douglas turned 19 and enlisted in the Army 3 days after Pearl Harbor. He came home in 1945 with a Bronze Star and a shrapnel wound in his left shoulder that never fully healed, and that gave him trouble in cold weather for the rest of his life. He came back to the workshop and worked beside his father. The sign stayed the same. Frank Marsh died of a heart attack in 1952. He went down in the workshop with a wrench in his hand, the way he would have chosen to go if he had been asked. Douglas took over the operation the next morning. He was 30 years old. He ran Marsh and Son for 4 years, the same way his father had run it, precise and honest and fair. Then in the spring of 1956, the shrapnel in his shoulder shifted. The VA hospital in Tucson operated in June. The operation did not go as planned. Douglas Marsh died on the table at the age of 34. Edna buried him beside his father in the Tucson cemetery on South 6th Avenue. She planted a mesquite seedling at the edge of the plot. It has grown taller than the marker now. After Douglas died, Edna tried to keep the workshop open. She knew the work from 40 years of watching the 2 men in her life do it. She could diagnose an engine by sound and identify a bad bearing by feel. But she was 69 years old, and the heavy work was beyond her. And the customers who had been loyal to Frank and then to Douglas began to drift to the newer shops on Speedway Boulevard. By the end of 1956, the workshop was closed. By the spring of 1957, she was behind on the property tax. By the fall of 1957, she was behind on the 2nd year of it. The county sent letters. She answered them when she could, and did not answer them when she could not, because answering required money she did not have. She sold the workshop tools one at a time through 1957 and into 1958. The last thing she sold was Frank's original toolbox, the one he had brought from Oklahoma in the truck in 1929. A man from a shop on Speedway gave her $40 for it. She took the $40 and paid the October light bill and the November water bill and put the rest in the kitchen drawer, and did not open the drawer for a week because she knew what was in it and what was not in it. The county court issued the eviction order in September of 1958. Edna received the notice on a Tuesday. She read it at the kitchen table the same way she had read every other piece of bad news in her life, carefully and without flinching, because flinching had never helped anything. She called her daughter Ruth in Phoenix. Ruth was 38 years old and had 3 children and a husband who worked at the copper mine in Globe and a mortgage of her own. Ruth said she would come on the weekend. She came on the Saturday, and they sat at the kitchen table and talked for a long time. And at the end of it, there was no money and no solution. And Ruth drove back to Phoenix on Sunday evening. And Edna stood on the porch and watched the car go, and then went inside. The deputy arrived on a Wednesday morning at 9 o'clock. He was a young man, not 30, in a county uniform that was too stiff and new for the work. He had the eviction order in one hand and the padlock in the other, and he came up the walk with the expression of a man who has been given a job he would prefer not to have. Edna was on the porch in her good house dress, the blue one she wore when she expected company, with her hands folded in front of her. She had known this morning was coming, and she had decided she would meet it standing up. The deputy stopped at the bottom of the porch steps. He read from the eviction order in a flat, careful voice. County of Pima, order of eviction, property at 412 South Meyer Avenue. The order is effective today. He looked up at her. Ma'am, I need you to gather what you need for the next few days and come with me. Edna looked at him. She looked at the padlock in his hand. She looked at the workshop door in the back, the door with the faded red letters above it that still said Marsh and Son, even though there was no son left to say it to. I have lived in this house for 29 years, she said. My husband built that workshop. My son came home from the war and worked in it until he died. She said it the way a woman says a thing she wants on the record, not because she expects it to change anything, but because it should be said. The deputy looked at the order in his hand. He did not look at her face. Ma'am, I'm sorry. I have to ask you to come with me. Where are you watching from? Drop your state in the comments. I want to see how far this story reaches. At the end of the block, the station wagon had stopped in the middle of South Meyer Avenue. It sat there for a long moment with the engine running. Then it pulled to the curb. The door opened. A man in a tan Stetson and a canvas ranch jacket got out. He had been driving north on South Meyer on his way to a morning meeting at the Arizona Inn, 2 miles up the road, when he saw the county truck and the deputy coming up the walk, and the old woman on the porch in her good blue house dress. He had driven another 30 feet, and then he had stopped and turned around. He came up the block on foot. He walked the way a man walks when he is not in a hurry, and does not need to be because the decision is already made. The deputy heard him coming and turned around. Edna saw him coming and said nothing. The man stopped at the bottom of the walk. He looked at the deputy. He looked at the padlock. He looked at the eviction order in the deputy's hand. What's owed? The deputy blinked. Sir, this is a county matter. I understand that. What's the number? The deputy looked at the order. Back taxes, 2 years, $340 and change, plus the court filing fee, $45. He paused. $385 total. The man looked at the number for a moment. Then he reached into the interior pocket of his canvas jacket and took out a long brown leather wallet. He opened it at the bottom of the walk in the full October morning light. He counted out 4 $100 bills. He held them out to the deputy. The deputy stared at the bills. Sir, I can't take payment in the field. This has to go through the county tax office. Then take me to the county tax office. Sir, I have an order to execute. The man looked at him steadily. The order is for non-payment of taxes. If the taxes are paid, the order is void. He held the bills out. Take me to whoever needs to take this money and give this woman a receipt, right now, this morning. The deputy looked at the bills. He looked at the man holding them. Something was working in his face, the slow, careful arrival of a recognition he had been resisting. He put the padlock back in his county truck. They went to the county tax office on Congress Street. The man in the tan Stetson paid $385 at the counter in cash, 4 bills counted onto the counter one at a time. The clerk wrote the receipt by hand on county letterhead. Paid in full. Property at 412 South Meyer Avenue. All outstanding taxes and fees. October 15, 1958. She stamped it in blue ink. The man took the receipt and gave it to the deputy and told him to take it back to Edna Marsh. The deputy drove back to South Meyer Avenue. Edna was still on the porch. He handed her the receipt. She read it. She read it again. She held it with both hands and looked at it for a long time without speaking. The man did not go back to South Meyer Avenue. He went to his meeting at the Arizona Inn. He was 40 minutes late and did not explain why, and nobody asked. Edna Marsh stayed in the house on South Meyer Avenue. She lived there for 11 more years, until 1969, when she moved to Phoenix to be near Ruth and the grandchildren. She kept the workshop locked, but did not sell it. The sign above the door stayed where it was. Marsh and Son, faded to pink by the Arizona sun, but still legible. She dusted the workshop door once a month, the way she dusted everything, because the things that mattered deserved to be kept. She found out who had paid the taxes the same way everyone found out things in Tucson in 1958. Slowly. From the deputy who told a colleague, who told a neighbor, who told Ruth, who called Edna on a Sunday afternoon, 3 weeks later. Edna listened to Ruth tell her the name. She did not say anything for a moment. Then she said, "That explains the hat." She never wrote a letter. She was not a woman who wrote letters to famous people, but she kept the receipt on the kitchen wall beside the window for the rest of her life, in the same frame she had used for Douglas's Bronze Star citation, the one with the thin gold border that Frank had bought at a 5 and dime in 1945, the week Douglas came home. The citation and the receipt in the same frame. The star on the left, the receipt on the right. Ruth Marsh donated the frame and its contents to the Arizona Historical Society in Tucson in 1984, 15 years after Edna moved to Phoenix and 4 years after Edna died. The frame is in the Society's collection. It is not on permanent display. It is in a flat storage drawer in the archive room on North Stone Avenue, wrapped in acid-free paper, labeled in pencil on a small card. The card says, "Property of Edna Marsh, 412 South Meyer Avenue, Tucson." 2 documents. 1 Bronze Star citation, 1945. 1 tax receipt, October 15th, 1958. If you open the drawer and unwrap the paper and hold the receipt up to the light, the blue stamp is still clear, paid in full. The handwriting on the amount line is the clerk's, careful and even. The amount is $385. There is no name on the receipt for the person who paid it. County receipts in 1958 did not require the payer's name. Only the property address and the amount and the date and the stamp. The storage room does not get much light. But on certain mornings in October, when the angle is right, the light comes through the small, high window above the archive shelves and crosses the drawer for a few minutes before it moves on up the wall. The drawer is closed. The frame is wrapped. The receipt is in the dark. But it is there. If this story reached you, do me a favor. Pass it on. Share it with a veteran in your life. There are more stories coming. The man stood at the bottom of the walk for a long moment after the deputy agreed to drive to the county office. He looked up at Edna on the porch. She was still standing with her hands folded in front of her in the blue housedress. She had not moved since the deputy arrived. She had the posture of a woman who had decided before this morning came that she would not be the one to look away first. He said, "How long has that sign been up there?" Edna looked at the workshop door. "Since 1929, she said. My husband painted it the week we arrived." He looked at it for a moment. The red letters had gone to pink in 30 years of Arizona sun. Marsh and Son. He looked at it the way a man looks at something he wants to remember accurately. "Your son," he said. "He served." "Korea," Edna said. "No, the Second War, Pacific. He came home in 1945 and went straight into that workshop and worked in it until the day he died." The man was quiet. He looked at the workshop, and then at the house, and then at the porch where Edna stood. Was he proud of it? The work? Edna looked at the faded sign. He used to say that a man who fixes things for a living is more useful than half the men in Washington put together. She paused. He got that from his father. The man in the Stetson almost smiled. He reached up and touched the brim of his hat. Then he turned and said something to the deputy in a low voice, and the deputy nodded, and they walked to the county truck. Edna watched them go. She stood on the porch until the truck turned the corner at the end of the block. Then she sat down in the chair beside the door, the wooden chair Frank had built in the workshop in 1931, and that she had repainted twice since then, and that still sat in exactly the same spot where he had put it. She sat in it and looked at the mesquite tree at the edge of the yard, the one that had been a seedling when Frank planted it, and that was taller than the roof now. And she waited. She waited 1 hour and 40 minutes. Then the deputy's truck came back around the corner and pulled up at the curb. The deputy got out and came up the walk with the receipt in his hand and gave it to her without saying anything. She read it. She looked at the stamp. She looked at the amount. She looked at the date. She folded it carefully along its original fold lines and held it in both hands. She looked at the deputy. He was young enough to be her grandson. He was standing at the bottom of the porch steps with his hat in his hands. "Who was he?" she said. The deputy looked at his hat. He said his name at the tax office counter, ma'am. The clerk recognized him. Edna waited. The deputy told her the name. Edna sat with it for a moment. She looked at the workshop door. She looked at the faded sign. She looked at the receipt in her hands. "That explains the hat," she said. The deputy put his hat back on. He picked up the padlock from where he had set it on the porch railing when he first arrived. He carried it back to the county truck. He put it on the seat. He drove away. Edna sat in Frank's chair for a while longer. The October morning was warming up the way Tucson mornings do, slowly and then all at once. The mesquite tree moved a little in the dry air coming off the Santa Cruz. The workshop door with its faded sign was in the shade still, the shadow of the house lying across it in a clean, straight line. She got up. She went inside. She put the receipt on the kitchen table and went to the cabinet and got the frame down, the thin, gold-bordered one from the 5 and dime that had held Douglas's Bronze Star citation since 1945. She opened the back of the frame and slid the citation to the left side and put the receipt on the right side and closed the frame again and hung it back on the wall beside the kitchen window. The citation on the left, the receipt on the right. She stood back and looked at it for a moment. Then she went and put the coffee on.